This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us this Thursday, January 30th. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, the impeachment trial of President Donald Trump could come to an end as soon as tomorrow, or it may go on for weeks. We're going to explain why. Bernie Sanders on the rise. See why Democrats worry what that means for their prospects of beating President Trump. The president signs the bipartisan new trade deal with Mexico and Canada. We're going to look at what it means for the U.S. economy. And a new documentary brings U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas to us in his own words. We've got those stories and more in this edition of CBN NewsWatch. We begin this half hour with the Senate impeachment trial of President Donald Trump, which may wrap up as soon as tomorrow, or it actually could go on for several more weeks. The key issue is whether Democrats will succeed in their push for the call for witnesses to testify, specifically former President Trump National Security Advisor John Bolton. His upcoming book reportedly claims the president held back aid to Ukraine to pressure it to investigate his possible political rival, Joe Biden, and his son, Hunter. Republicans say if there were witnesses, they want to bring their own.
I'm no fan of John Bolton, although I like him a little more than I used to. But you should hear from him. You should want to.
I want Adam Schiff. I want Hunter Biden. I want Joe Biden. I want the whistleblower.
The vote on whether to call witnesses is expected tomorrow, and both Republicans and Democrats now seem to think it will fail, meaning a vote to acquit the president could happen tomorrow as well. The president also tweeted game over after a new video surfaced showing Bolton talking about Ukraine policy but not saying anything about an improper quid pro quo. CBN News is providing special coverage of the impeachment. We're carrying the Senate trial of President Donald Trump live every day on the CBN News Channel. Turning now to the Democratic presidential race, Bernie Sanders is on the rise in Iowa, and that has many leading Democratic political strategists worried. Sanders is openly predicting a victory in next Monday's Iowa caucuses.
The reason we are going to win here in Iowa is we have the strongest grassroots movement of any campaign.
Some polls show Sanders leading in the Hawkeye state ahead of former Vice President Joe Biden.
I haven't looked at all the polls, but they're up, down, and I think it's going to be a close race in Iowa.
But we're feeling good. Polls are polls.
Many leading Democrats worry if Sanders wins Iowa and then New Hampshire, he could build momentum and potentially win the presidential nomination. That's a major concern for them because they don't believe the socialist Sanders can beat President Trump in the general election. Democrats lost badly in a special election Tuesday for Congress in Texas that they went all the way out to win. The race was held in the Houston suburbs. Democrats brought in endorsements from Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and Michael Bloomberg, along with heavy campaign spending and more. It was supposed to be an example of how the Democrats are going to gain political ground in this year's election. But the Republican candidate won in a landslide. Gary Gates had 58% to 42% for Democrat Elizabeth Markowitz. Turning now to Washington, a major legislative victory for the president as he signed a new trade deal with Mexico and Canada Wednesday. It replaces NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. CBN White House correspondent Ben Kennedy brings us this look at the new trade policy.
This is no doubt a big victory for the president. It's being hailed as a win for the American worker and is even projected to create 600,000 jobs.
I keep my promises and I'm fighting for the American worker.
Surrounded by American workers on the White House South Lawn, President Trump signed the largest trade deal in American history.
NAFTA ends today and a new era of jobs and growth begins under the USMCA.
It replaces the 25-year-old trade agreement with provisions aimed to strengthen the manufacturing industry, improve labor standard enforcement, and increase market access for American dairy farmers.
This is something we really put our heart into. It's probably the #1 reason that I decided to lead this crazy life that I'm leading right now, as opposed to that beautiful, simple life of luxury that I led before this happened. But I love doing it.
This is quite a victory. And, you know, I was one who was skeptical, as you know, that Trump could pull this off. I thought it was a risky strategy.
But Moore says that strategy paid off and calls it Trump's biggest bipartisan victory since taking office, adding the deal comes on the heels of Trump signing the Phase 1 trade agreement with China.
I guess what this means is Trump is on a roll here. And they just announced last week or a few days ago that they're now looking at really trying to finalize a trade deal with Britain. So Trump is really redesigning how we do trade deals.
Now, President Trump will tour a manufacturing facility in Michigan on Thursday. It's there he'll see firsthand the impact the USMCA will have. Mexico has already ratified the agreement, and Canada is expected to follow suit in the coming weeks. Ben Kennedy, CBN News, the White House.
Continuing our coverage, coming up, an in-depth look at the potential impact of this trade deal on the American economy. It comes as Washington faces a serious problem, the exploding federal deficit, which is set to go over $1 trillion this year. We're going to have that when we come back.
When I came to Regent University, it's like the world opened up. I felt like I needed to advance my career and go back to school. Regent was a perfect fit for me. The Regent professors are world class. You are equipped. The focus of the faculty is on each individual student, whether it's online or in person. You become a part of Regent's family. You carry with you not just the content and the knowledge, but the confidence to understand that we can be significant in the world.
Regent University. Follow your path.
Nigerian Christians
in Iran are routinely arrested.
Happily, Christians continue to suffer.
In times of trial and affliction, you need to know the truth.
One of the fastest growing Christian populations in the world.
Join Wendy Griffith and George Thomas for Christian World News.
Young people are the ones who are open to the gospel.
Powerful stories of suffering and hope that affect all Christians. Watch Christian World News, Saturday at 5 p.m. Get Protect Your Sleep and discover how to improve the quality of your life. A free DVD or booklet from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
5 leading experts help remove the obstacles between you and restorative sleep.
When you don't get a restful night's sleep, you wake up with an accumulation of stress.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet today.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
You'll discover how food affects your sleep, how to put insomnia to rest, explore effective remedies for sleep apnea, and much more in Protect Your Sleep. Wake up to your best life and get Protect Your Sleep today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to CBN.com to get your free DVD or booklet.
As we mentioned, President Donald Trump signed the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement Wednesday, but exactly how good will the USMCA deal be for the U.S. economy? Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, the national radio host and host of the program Financial Issues says he's optimistic about the agreement, but concerned about the rising federal deficit and the impact of the coronavirus in China.
I'm assuming you're very positive about USMCA, so what's it going to mean for Americans?
I am very positive, and thank you for having me, Gary, and it's great to be with you again. Yeah, I think it's going to be very good for 2020. It's going to be good for the economy. There's a lot of enthusiasm. Some of that enthusiasm has some concern now with all the virus scares and the issues that China is having in their economy. All in all, I'm going to say it's a great start to getting a final deal with China.
How about the recently signed Phase 1 deal with China, then? Who benefits the most from that, China or the U.S.?
It's very good for China. I would say initially it was better for enthusiasm, animal spirits of investing in China and so on than it was for the U.S. So I think it's been better for them. Overall, I think it's a pretty good deal for the U.S. in that for the first time in many, many years, we are seeing fairness come into trade between the developed nation of China and the developed nation of the U.S. And it's been 20 years that we have had unfair trade deals. So I think that gives a sense of confidence to the American economy and traders on Wall Street about what President Trump has done and is continuing to do.
What are the prospects for a phase 2 deal with China? That may be a lot harder to finalize, right?
Yeah, it's going to be harder to finalize. But here's the interesting part about it, which nobody anticipated. One of the things that happened was that President Trump did not remove any of the tariffs on this phase 1 deal. China was hoping and fully expecting that to happen. It didn't happen. They knew that, obviously, before they signed the deal. But it caught, I think, the markets here by surprise, being that now what happens is we have a way of holding China accountable for not living up to phase 1. And China is far more incentivized to get phase 2 done in hopes that some of those tariffs will remove.
Finally, the Congressional Budget Office just announced, Dan, that the U.S. budget deficit will likely breach $1 trillion this year. Now, I know you're probably worried about that. How will that affect the economy?
I've been very, very concerned about the national debt. Unfortunately, I'm a lot more concerned than even the administration is, and some in it. So I think that this goes to show my point that I was making in that, look, Gary, we're beyond the point of growing our way out of deficits. We've passed that about 4 years ago. So we cannot get out from under deficits without growth, no doubt about it. But we also cannot get out from under deficits at this point without cuts in spending and the shrinking of the size of government. So we have an opportunity here to have a perfect storm of having both GDP growth in our economy, and if we take the step to start cutting government, cutting spending, then we can get out from under this. But there doesn't seem to look as though there's a lot of will right now for us to cut and make the cuts that are necessary. So we're not going to get out of these deficits by growth alone. It is not going to happen. We have reached a point beyond that. Okay, a task for a possible re-elected President Trump then, Dan. I'm sure you'll be continuing to sound the alarm on that. Dan Celia, national radio and TV host of Financial Issues, thanks so much for sharing your insights. You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Gary. I appreciate it.
Also tonight on the Global Lane, we're going to hear from Dr. Alveda King about the African-American vote in the upcoming primaries, along with other important subjects in the news today. That is on the Global Lane. It's this evening at 9:30 Eastern on the CBN News Channel. Still ahead, one of the quietest but most influential figures in Washington opens up in a new documentary. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. We're going to hear our interview with the director of that documentary and a look at the film itself when we come back.
Christians around the world are standing with the Israelis. But why? In CBN's free magazine, Friends of Israel, you'll discover why Christians are supporting the Jewish state, how Israel is fulfilling prophecy as a light to the nations, and ways you can pray for the people of Israel. Israel needs the support of friends like you. Call now or go to cbn.com to get your free copy of Friends of Israel.
Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the work of your Spirit, Lord God, with this movement of getting the Bible, yes, Lord, into public schools.
Watch The Prayer Link, Tuesday nights at 6:30.
Hey, if you're tired and exhausted all day, you can't think clearly, and you really just need a cup or even a pot of coffee to get through your day, then join me, Dr. Josh Axe, for this new series where I'm going to teach you how to transform your diet and use essential oils and supplements to get a better night's sleep.
Get Protect Your Sleep and live your best life with innovative information from 5 leading sleep experts.
If you're not a great sleeper, you can do things to make yourself a great sleeper. If you're already a pretty good sleeper, you can enhance your sleep and be even better.
Discover a sleep-enhancing bedtime routine, how to put insomnia to rest, learn how to relieve pain that disturbs sleep, and much more in Protect Your Sleep.
Everything you do better with a good night's sleep.
Wake up to your best life. Call 1-800-700-7000 to get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Don't miss out on this brand new series.
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas has a reputation of silence on the High Court. There are reports he broke a 3-year silence back in March of 2019, and there was a 10-year silence before that. But he's opening up in a new documentary. We're speaking with the director, but first, here's a Studio 5 first look at Created Equal. Clarence Thomas in his own words.
Judge Thomas, do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. When I was 6, I wandered the streets by myself. We were hungry and didn't know when you'd eat. Someplace in my life, the road split off. I'd gone to the seminary. I'd gone to all-white schools. I was never going to be a part of that world. I was never going to be white. The problem is I could never go back completely to the world I came from. We're supposed to be revolutionaries. We were for anybody who's kind of in your face. I saw what I had become, lashing out at every single thing. And then I asked God that if you take anger out of my heart, I'll never hate again. And that was the beginning of the slow return to where I started. I was under a constant attack. You're not really black because you're not doing what we expect black people to do.
That I will nominate Judge Clarence Thomas to serve as Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court.
That's when all heck broke loose.
And that's just a quick look at Created Equal. Clarence Thomas in his own words. Now, the director of that film joins us now, Michael Pack. First of all, how did you manage to get Clarence Thomas, who's known for being quiet, to actually speak, and how long did you spend with him?
Well, he's quiet in the sense that he doesn't give a lot of interviews. He's actually a very well-spoken, gregarious guy, although he does call himself an introvert. The story is that Justice Thomas, we had heard from mutual friends that Justice Thomas was tired of having his story told by his enemies, full of misrepresentations and half-truths. So in talking to him and researching it, I realized what a great story he had to tell. And I also realized that he was really the one to tell the story. You know, we originally were going to interview a whole bunch of other people, but really he's the one that knows his story best. So we picked this pattern. It's called Created Equal, Justice Thomas in his own words, because he speaks directly to camera as if he's talking directly to the viewer, telling him about his life. So I interviewed him for over 30 hours, just him and his wife. They're the only interviews in the film. And you hear Justice Thomas tell his life story his way as he experienced it.
In watching, I had no idea that he spent time in seminary. What are some of the things we learn?
Well, it's an incredible story. I mean, it's a story of him, of his faith, having his faith, losing his faith, coming back to it. I mean, he grew up. He was born in Pinpoint, Georgia. They were dirt poor. His father left before he can remember, raised by his mother. His mother realized she couldn't take care of her 2 children and brought them to her father, his grandfather, to raise. And that's what turned Justice Thomas's life around. His grandfather, who had a small business, made him work hard, taught him self-discipline, core biblical values, a good education. And that really changed Thomas, and he thrived in those circumstances. And he did so well there that, as you say, he decided to enter the seminary and become a priest. He would have been one of the first African-American priests in Savannah. But the seminaries had been all white. He was one of the first to desegregate them. And so he started to experience racism. It's the late 60s now, and he just felt the Catholic Church wasn't doing enough for civil rights. So he really decided he didn't want to be a priest. He came back and told his grandfather, who promptly kicked him out of his house, the only home he had really known. And suddenly he felt race and racism explained everything. He lost his faith. He lost his calling. And so he had flipped from those core values that his grandfather and the nuns had raised him in. And it was only by hitting rock bottom that his life turned. He came to the chapel and asked God to take anger out of his heart.
The Supreme Court confirmation process, because it was so contentious, what did you take away from his conversation about that moment?
Well, once he worked for Ronald Reagan and he was a conservative African-American, he was attacked all the time from the left. And it reached a peak in his very contentious confirmation battle. But the confirmation battle had two parts. First, a regular confirmation battle, and then Anita Hill's testimony accusing him of sexual harassment was leaked. And in the second part, he really felt he was spent. They felt it was a spiritual battle. He and his wife, they prayed. They had nothing left. They really looked to their faith to guide them. They asked for the Holy Spirit to speak through them. And it was really a different and it's very moving to hear them speak about it. It was a really difficult time. I don't think they would have gotten through it without their faith. I will say that I really hope that your listeners and viewers go see it. It's a great, powerful story, especially for young people, but really inspiring for everyone.
I would say no matter what side of the political aisle you're on, hearing Justice Clarence Thomas's story is well worth doing. And of course, it's in theaters this weekend. It is Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words. Michael Pack, thank you so much for nailing the story and getting to sit down with him. Again, Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words is in theaters starting tomorrow, January 31st. You can find more information about it at www.justicethomasmovie.com. Coming up, the world's first Christian airline is getting ready to take off, and we're going to show you how it will be helping missionaries fulfill the biblical Great Commission. We've got the story for you when we come back.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel. Now available at cbnradio.com.
Meet the pastors who are preaching the gospel in a fresh, fearless way. I'm Roberto Torres-Cedillo. Join me each week for Next Gen Voices. And watch God transform a generation.
Prophecy thousands of years old.
We were called to be a light to the world.
Being fulfilled today. Discover how. Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000.
We consider it our duty to reach out and help others around the world.
For a gift of $10 or more, you can own the acclaimed CBN documentary To Life. Just call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
To treat a human, no matter what he is, which religious he have, which color he is, this is what I'm doing.
See how the people of Israel are fulfilling prophecy.
History is being written, and I want to be a part of it.
By sharing their knowledge.
In Africa, in Asia, in South America, in East Europe.
And their love.
This is how we work. This is us.
Get to life. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to cbn.com.
Get the top political news and analysis from Washington on Faith Nation, tonight at 6 Eastern, only on the CBN News Channel.
The world's first Christian airline is preparing for takeoff. As Caitlin Burke now reports, it serves missionaries in the air so they can serve on the ground.
Battery switch on. Standby pump on. APU door open.
At the North Texas Regional Airport is an aviation ministry dedicated to fulfilling the Great Commission.
We give wings to missionaries. The Great Commission tells us we go to all the world and preach the gospel to every creature.
Judah One has a hangar full of small planes and plans for a commercial fleet able to transport missionaries and their cargo around the world.
We're able to get out in the mission field to take smaller teams, 12-member teams, 10-member teams such as that, taking them in the mission field. But in the future, once we get our certification, the 125 certification for the large plane, then we can carry the larger teams of up to 136 with our MD-83 and 17,000 pounds of cargo. And of course, we can go anywhere with those.
When Hurricane Dorian hit the Bahamas, Judah One made it possible for CBN's Operation Blessing to reach and help storm victims.
In the case of a natural disaster like happened with Dorian, we need to be in there quickly. That was Operation Blessing. They contacted us initially saying, look, how can you help us to get our teams in quickly? And that's where the small jets really come in handy. A lot of times the major airports are not open where they can handle the larger planes coming in.
They not only transported Operation Blessing staff to the hard-hit islands, but also moved pallets full of supplies, including water purification systems, chlorine, disaster recovery supplies, and medical aid.
What do you feel in your legs, right? Blood pressure?
Yes.
Judah One started operations in 1994 after founder Everett Aaron says God spoke a calling over his life.
I see hundreds of these airplanes lined up as far as you can see. They're full of food, medical supplies, Bibles. The engines are running on them. I can see the crew in the cockpit. I can see the flight attendants inside the plane. I mean, these planes are ready to go. And I get super excited because, I knew in my spirit these planes are missionary aircraft, and they're taking supplies into the mission field.
He saw missionary teams lined up outside the planes, but no one would board. Aaron says he could feel a grieving of the Holy Spirit, so he asked God why no one was moving.
And the Lord spoke, and he said, none of these people, and when he said none of these people, it wasn't just the missionaries. I saw the pilots on the planes, the flight attendants, the mechanics that maintain the planes, everybody that's associated with doing this stuff. He said, none of these people can do what they're called to do until you get the airplanes. This is my call in your life.
Aaron hopes that 2020 will be the year Judah One goes from a private nonprofit organization to the world's first Christian airline.
Becoming the world's first Christian airline is opening doors for us to be able to go anywhere in the world and do anything. But it also is opening doors for us because part of our heart is not just, in being an airline, is not just transporting the missionaries, but by getting into that world of becoming an airline, we want to open our own flight school. We want to be able to train missionary pilots. It opens doors for us to do so many things.
The Judah One motto is your hands, God's love, our wings. So when you're ready to answer the call to go, they're ready to take you. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Denison, Texas.
Time now for your Thursday Thankful, and I leave you with this prayer of gratitude as you go about all that lies ahead and behind today. Father, thank you for grace and mercy. They are the air of life I breathe, inhaling grace and exhaling mercy. Again, with that prayer, make today a thankful Thursday, no matter how much is left of the day. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can always find more of our CBN News programs on the CBN News Channel at any time. You can also find them online at cbnnews.com. We would love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. Feel free to email us. The address is there on your screen. It's newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you're also free to reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So I hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a thankful Thursday. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow.